Her 6 furry family members had chronic medical conditions, despite her best efforts with conventional medicine. And I am so happy to have you guys here today. I'm Dr. Ruth Roberts, the original holistic pet health coach. With me is Cara Hanrahan, a holistic health practitioner for both people and pets. So right on, one medicine. She has worked as a critical care nurse and a nurse practitioner for a decade and is nearly done with her functional medicine support certification. For those of you that don't know that organization, the Institute for Functional Medicine is one of the oldest, in fact, the oldest organization that has promoted and trained professionals in functional medicine. Their program is intense and very stringent. And in her spare time, she's also become certified as a holistic pet health coach and started Raw Pod Ventures, her holistic pet health and nutrition business. That actually started several years ago, after she realized that 4 out of her 6 furry family members had chronic medical conditions, despite her best efforts with conventional medicine. So her 3 dogs, currently Copper, Bear, and Piper, and 3 cats, Goose, Oliver, and Flower, no longer suffer from chronic pancreatitis, recurrent vomiting, and anal gland issues, hot spots, ear infections, yeast overgrowth, advanced dental disease, and more, because with chronic disease, we just don't stop at one condition. We have to have lots. And so this is the amazing thing. Fresh food and a holistic lifestyle helped support changes in all 6 of those animals to become healthy and happy. Cara's goal is to continue to be a health advocate for both people and pets and empower others to take a leap into the world of natural health and fresh food in order to make that transformation from simply surviving to truly thriving. Cara, welcome. I'm so glad you could join us today. And there you go.
Thank you.
And Mary's, I want the link to her free training, please. So hang on, Mary, we're going to get there.
Yeah.
We're coming. We're coming.
I actually can't put anything in the chat because I'm not connected through my own StreamYard. So hopefully you have it on your end. But if you don't, I'll send it to you, Dr. Ruth, and then maybe you can put it in for them.
So there's actually a private chat if you look over on the right-hand side.
I do. I see it.
Yep. And so you can drop stuff there and I can drop it back up. Cool.
Perfect.
So we got some good stuff going on. So here is one extremely smart and dedicated woman for both people and pets. So you've been doing the conventional stuff for over a decade. And what inspired you to start moving from conventional medicine on the human side into functional medicine?
Yeah, so I think a similar story to a lot of people, it was my pets. So I have one of them is laying in my lap right now. That's Oliver. And I jokingly call him my tiny tumor because he's quite literally always attached to me. But it was actually my dog Copper who got me here. And I never had a dog growing up. And then I moved out. I got my own house. It had a yard. I said, yes, I'm getting a dog. So on April 1st, it is no joke, I bring home a dog. And from the get-go, I knew something was wrong. And he never wanted to eat. And he was always a very lethargic puppy. I got him from a rescue. I had no background on him. Didn't even know what breed he was. It just said hound mix. And over the years, he would have these recurrent vomiting episodes. It would happen 5, 6, 10 times in a day over the course of a couple of days. And I don't know why my brain never connected the dots, because that's how people present with pancreatitis. But I think when it comes to your animals, it's almost like you're looking through a fog. Like it's really hard to put those pieces together when it's your own pets or even your own family members. It's a human. And it wasn't until he had some weight loss between veterinary appointments and me talking about his symptoms that they ran some blood work and said, yeah, he's got chronic pancreatitis. And I was like, oh my gosh, of course he does. And so we went down the conventional path of prescription kibble and try these meds, and nothing worked. He was still skinny as a rail. He still would barf all the time. And then I got another dog, and he had severe allergies and food sensitivities and recurrent yeast and hot spots and ear infections. And then I met my husband, and his dog had anal gland issues. We were expressing those all the time. She had chronic diarrhea. She was anxious. And my kitties, one of my cats, tiny tumor cat, he would throw up 4, 5 times a week for no good reason whatsoever. And one day I just said, this cannot be it. I'm doing everything right. And so I started to learn about fresh food. And after psyching myself out for actually months, I finally did it. And from the day that I put a plate of fresh food in front of Copper, he never had a pancreatitis flare again. It's been 3 years. And I just knew that this was it. This was the path. And I literally leaped onto it and started running, and I never looked back. It's changed my entire life, my whole outlook on medicine and health.
Amazing, amazing.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, that is true love to do anal gland expressions with your husband. That's a whole different level of intimacy.
Yeah, the three of us, we had a lot of bathtub time with this dog, let me tell you.
Golly, that is just astonishing. And so have you started working actively with people as well as pets, or
Not
you're
yet.
still doing the
Although,
certification? So
yeah, I'm still doing the certification. Now, technically, I don't actually need to be certified to work in functional medicine. It just looks professional to have the credentials. I do give a lot of people advice on the side. I've reached out to friends. I'm helping a friend right now with some issues, and another friend of mine, I reached out to him the other day because he actually just got diagnosed with a glioblastoma. And so I talk to people a lot about functionality and just diet and nutrition and a holistic lifestyle, talk about it a lot at work. Technically, I am still working in conventional medicine. I work in the medical ICU. And so that's like my day job, I like to call it, even though I actually work night shift.
yeah, I was gonna say.
But soon. I'm hoping as soon as I sit for my exam and we make the move home, we're moving across the country. In August, I want to leave my current position, go home, work in functional medicine. That's the goal.
Sweet. And actually, for those of you on with us today, just out of curiosity, there's how many of you have experienced or been told your dog or cat has pancreatitis, just for fun? So
I bet
yeah,
you the number's high.
this should be interesting. So there's 28 folks on right now. We'll let folks pop that in. But so you've come up with this really interesting approach, and I dropped the link to your Back to Basics on there. But you've developed something called the six vital roots. So tell me about what it is and why that is important for long-term health.
Yeah, I created the Vital Roots Holistic Health Model because I felt very disorganized in the way I would approach clients and their pets. And so every animal and person is an individual, right? They come to you, they have their own problem going on. Maybe they've been suffering for weeks, maybe it's been years. Maybe they've seen 5 practitioners, maybe they've only gotten internet advice, right? So every animal needs to be looked at as an individual and kind of approached them that way. The problem is if you don't have any kind of framework to organize your thoughts, organize your approach, it's going to make for a really disorganized time together. And the more I would go into it, the more I would realize I talked about this aspect of health with this person, but then I forgot to talk about it with that person. And I wanted something a little bit more organized and very comprehensive, because I think that when you approach something that way, you just get a better result at the end. So this health model has what I like to call the 6 roots, because when you are planting something, you're nourishing those roots, right? From the water that you feed it to the mineral and the healthy soil that you planted it in. So the 6 roots of my health model, which really can be called pillars, are nutrition, hydration, stress, sleep, exercise, and environment. And I can briefly tell you a little bit about each. So nutrition, I think, is obvious, right? And I could go on forever about nutrition. That's the first thing that interested me in this world in the first place. But really, you literally are what you eat. And so if you're not eating a nutritious, species appropriate diet, you can't have good health. It would be like feeding a person potato chips in hydrogenated oil and a multivitamin every single day and expecting them to be at peak performance. That's not going to happen for people, and it's not going to happen.
Really? That's not going to work?
Crazy, I know. But yes, so that's like the first is nutrition is like the biggest foundation here. Hydration is something that I felt very compelled to include because not a lot of people think about the importance of water and hydration, not just in terms of the food should be moist and not dry, but just what water are you giving your animals? Because And I'm not ashamed to say, and I'm always very open about the things that I feel like I did kind of wrong before. And one of those things was those giant plastic tubs that you can get at like PetSmart that you fill with water and then it just sits there until it's empty and it'll last 3 to 5 days and it gets disgusting and slimy and dirty. That's what my animals were drinking out of for years. I never thought about it because in the back of my mind, I think I went, well, if they're selling it, it must be safe. So that's not the hydration that we want to provide to our animals. So I talk about the importance of clean water, different options for water, and the things that can go into water, right? Think about heavy metals, fluoride, pharmaceuticals. People flush their prescription medications down the toilet and it goes into our water system. So there's a lot of crap in water, no pun intended, that we want to filter out if possible. Sleep and stress, they can go hand in hand. Sleep is really important. And I think we focus on it more for people than we do for pets. But sleep is when we heal, right? Sleep is when your mitochondria, your little cellular powerhouses that are making literally all of the energy you need to live and function 24/7, that's when they get to kind of slow down a little bit, start to recuperate, start to heal from the stressors of the day. So sleep is important. And in particular, I think I run into this more for animals that have canine cognitive disorder, for one, because they're up, they're wandering, right? They get sundowners. Nighttime is not always the best time for them. Also, what I include in here, which I find really interesting, and I think this is right up your alley, Dr. Ruth, is in TCVM or just TCM, you have that body clock where certain times of the day or night correspond with certain systems. And so if you have an animal that, say, wakes up every day at 2 o'clock on the dot, the hours of 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. are associated with the liver. So maybe there could be something going on with the liver and you want to check out the liver health. So I find like patterns in the night to be just as interesting as patterns in the day. So sleep, I think, is important. From a stress perspective, could be emotional, could be physical, right? So like physical stressors, I think, and again, this is something that I know you're really passionate about. I think hormones when I think about stress. So your stress hormones like your cortisol, and that's all tied together with thyroid health and adrenal health. And unfortunately, so many of our animals have been spayed and neutered early, which I completely understand why in many cases it's necessary. But we've gotten to realize that the early spay and neuter syndrome is really wreaking havoc on our pets. So that's part of it there. And then, of course, the emotional stress, especially for our kitties, right? Kitties can be super stressed out and we never know until all of a sudden they pretty much explode in front of us and we're like, oh my God, you've been keeping that in the entire time?
Yes.
And then the last two are, I think, again, obvious. So environment, what is your environment like? Is it clean? Because I used to live in a house that had Glade plugins and Bath and Body Works scented candles, and I used Pine Sol on my floor, and I had Downy scent boosters in my laundry, and I used shampoo from the pet store, and all of the toxic stuff that we're putting in, on, and around us can be really detrimental. So that's another really big section. And then exercise is exercise. And we are all taking exercise for granted. When I'm feeling lazy or tired or overwhelmed, the first thing that goes by the wayside is exercise, but it's actually the single most important thing that you can do and you can do for your pets to boost cellular energy. It is actually just as big of a risk factor for cardiovascular disease, being sedentary, as smoking now. So we're starting to realize the importance and the effects of exercise on the entire body. So those are my six pillars, and we attack them all so that we can put them all together, because those 6 things, when you nourish them, are what's going to lay that foundation for health, because they support your mitochondrial health, so cellular energy, your gut health, and by extension, your immune health. And that, in my opinion, is how you promote wellness and longevity in a well-rounded manner. That's my
right on. That's it. And it's beautiful. And yes, Lori, dogs can have sundowner syndrome and have canine cognitive deficiency and sort of stuff in between. And it's interesting.
Yeah.
In practice, it was how much of this is really, oh, he's old, he's got cognitive deficiency. But what I found is that actually, oh, he's old and he has horrible arthritis that nobody's addressed as pain. And when you take that pain out of the picture, then the dog comes back to him or herself. But yeah, there's pretty much anything that you can think of that's a dreaded chronic disease in humans, we can now label our pets with as well.
Yeah.
And guess what? It's the same underlying factors. If we think about that, comparing what's going on with people and dogs, what do you find? You just went through all of the things that create that you're trying to work on, but what are the things that are underlying all of these issues being a chronic problem?
Yeah, gut
If we
health is
break it
like
down
the
into
top.
functional systems.
Yeah, it's going to be the gut. It's always going to be the gut. So, the amount of people and animals that I see who have some kind of underlying leaky gut, dysbiosis, just your gut microbiota is just wrecked. And we don't realize that we're doing it to ourselves so easily. It's almost like everything out there is just like waiting to attack our gut lining and just come at us. And so that's probably the top thing there. And it's really easy to fall into habits of convenience. You don't have enough time. You don't have time to meal prep. You don't have time to go to the grocery store and get the organic produce, or maybe you don't have the money to grab that grass-fed beef because it's $10 more a pound than the ground beef over here that doesn't say anything about how they were fed on the package. So all of these things can really conspire to wreak havoc on our gut health. So that's probably the biggest system that I see complications in, which are leading to these chronic medical conditions, autoimmune disease, environmental allergies, food sensitivities, psychosocial problems. Your gut microbiota and your oral microbiome, they directly affect how you're thinking, how you're feeling, what food you're craving. And so when those things are out of whack, it can lead to depression. It can actually contribute to dementia they're finding in people. And it's crazy how the gut is truly connected to all aspects of health. So that's the biggest one for sure.
Right on. And that's the thing is if the gut goes off the rails, then the detoxification system goes along with it after a
Mhm.
while, and then the inflammatory system gets knocked out of whack. But it's what you were saying about water, I think, is super critical because the other thing they're finding is that along with the amyloid plaques that may or may not have caused the Alzheimer's, which is a whole interesting story, are actually finding is microplastics in the brain.
Yep.
And so if you're not filtering your water for all of those things, this is going to impact our pets as well. And so all of these chemicals, like they banned DDT in 1968 in the United States, but because this is in the water cycle, meaning
Yep.
but rains
Mhm.
and then it goes off into creeks, rivers, and then vaporizes, goes back up
Mhm.
in the clouds, goes in the rain. There are kids born today with DDT in their cord blood. So even though
Yeah.
it's not been in the US for, oh, almost as long as me, as long as I've been alive, that is, it's still in the environment. And this is a difficult problem.
So much crap in there. And
Choosing,
I think about
yeah,
glyphosate. Glyphosate isn't
yeah,
even banned here yet, but they're spraying those crops with Roundup, and it is constant. What is the half life of Roundup? Like 150 years or something? It's going to
yeah,
be here
something
long
like
after
that.
we're all gone.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And it's like in Connecticut, I just read an article. They are much of the Northeast is struggling with PFAS contamination of the waters
mm,
supply. And so Connecticut, they're estimating it's going to be 1,000 years if we stop using them today before it's clean. So y'all, this is part of what we're saying. Like this is all important stuff to get well, but ultimately these are the things you need to do to stay well. And
right.
this is so critical. So let's talk about another one of both of our favorite topics, and that is food. And so, talk about how you suggest people feed, and then compared to other fresh food approaches.
Yeah. So within the Vital Roots model, I created something called the Vital Pause fresh feeding method. So there's other ones out there that I know people will have heard of, right? So PMR, 80-10-10, the BARF method, bones and raw food. Hail Dr. Ian Billinghurst, right? The Ancestral Diet by Feed Real Institute, right? All amazing, phenomenal. I've fed all of them. I've talked to clients about all of them. But when I started making this model, one of the things that I really wanted to target was our cellular health. And I don't know if you've heard of this person, Casey Means and her brother,
Oh
Callie
yeah,
Means.
Casey and
They,
Callie.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
got to meet
So
them
they
both.
co-wrote a book.
Amazing people.
You did. Well, they co-wrote a book called Good Energy. And
Yes.
I had already been very interested in mitochondrial health for the last couple of years going through my functional medicine program, because I will tell you that everything that they talk about goes back to cellular energy. Because if you didn't have your mitochondria creating energy for you, you would cease to exist. You would just expire. And so when I read their book and I was creating my model, I went, I really need to be talking about how food impacts mitochondrial or cellular energy, because this is it. This is how we keep ourselves going, and we have the most efficient fuel that we can have. So there's a couple of core differences, or I think things that make my model unique. So the first is that a big emphasis on using actually muscular organs. I'm a big fan of muscular organs. I use muscle meat as well, but I love using heart and lung. Those are probably my two favorite muscular organs to use. And I think they just have a slightly better nutritional profile. I love it for our kitties because kitties need the taurine, and taurine is most prominent. It's in meat, but most prominent in heart. And so I really like to use that and put an emphasis on that, because I think people forget that you see a model and it says X amount of muscle meat and they reach for the grind or the pork shoulder or something like that. And I think people forget, if you don't say it, you can use a muscular organ there as well. So I just make sure that I put an emphasis there. The other two biggest differences, in my opinion, is I have specified a breakdown of fish, because we know that soil depletion is a huge problem, because if you plant vegetables in depleted soil, they may grow, but they're not going to be packed full of the nutrients that maybe even 50 years ago they had. All of the monocropping and spraying of the pesticides, it's stripping our soil. And so the nutrients, especially those B vitamins that are delicate, that you may have been getting 20, 40 years ago from your veggies that were grown, we're not quite getting them anymore. But shellfish pack a really powerful punch in a small package. And so small amounts of sustainably sourced or good quality shellfish can really bridge the gap, like oysters for zinc and mussels for manganese. And those are things that tend to be deficient in homemade diets. So I really like the use of shellfish, and specifically pointing out, hey, toss some shellfish in there. And then, of course, small fatty fish for your omegas and your vitamin D. That's like my second kind of specific thing. But the thing that I'm the most enamored by and really love about this method is what I call the 4F section. And that is fiber, fungi, ferments, and phytonutrients. And I know that phytonutrient starts with a P, but it sounds like an F, so just go with it. But
Just go for the phonetics.
Just go for the phonetics. So what this section is emphasizing, this is really all about the mitochondria. I want you to be feeding the rainbow, right? So your phytonutrients that you get from your colorful plants are going to be providing certain things to the body. So like red foods are high in lycopene, right? And that is really great for heart health. Yellow foods have lutein, which is amazing for your eye. Blue and purple foods are high in anthocyanins, which are antioxidants, anti-inflammatory. They support brain health, right? Feeding the rainbow, but using low glycemic veggies to do it, is a really amazing way to provide those antioxidants to the body. And that helps fuel cellular energy and repair all of the waste products of it. And then the ferments for the gut health, super, super important. And fungi, you don't even want to get me started on mushrooms. I firmly believe that mushrooms should be a part of the diet as frequently as possible, be it fresh mushrooms, which I get from my farmer's market, chop it up, give it a steam, puree it, I put it in my dog's dish. Mushroom tinctures I use all the time by Myco Dog. I have made tea from mushrooms. So if you have a doggy that has issues with dementia, you can boil, right? And steep lion's mane, chopped up lion's mane, and steep that, and then give them the tea. And that can help them with their canine cognitive disorder, right? Really big on the ferments. So that is probably my favorite section of my diet. And it is available on my website. You can see I've written a couple of blogs about it now, and I go into deep detail about each section and why I think it's beneficial.
Cool. And so what were the 4 Fs again?
Fiber, fungi, ferments, and then phytonutrients.
Bingo. Cool. So yeah, and Julie, you're right. Our pets are matching us. So I think human adults are now we're at 73% overweight, obese, morbidly obese in the entire population.
Yeah. Almost 80% of individuals in America are diabetic, pre-diabetic, or insulin resistant. 80%. And that includes our
Astonishing.
children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and this is the problem is that's horrible in us, but these stats we're getting
So
damn
bad.
close with our pets as well.
Yeah.
And in veterinary medicine, we do not talk about metabolic disease, which is that pre-diabetic phase, or even insulin resistance. And this is where we'll measure insulin and H1AC as well to look at how well are you, and your blood sugar, and use those three things together. How well are you handling sugars and insulin? And it's alarming.
Yeah. And it's
So we don't even
easy. Oh,
know
sorry. I was
how to
going to say,
do
in
that in
people,
pets.
you can tell, right? If you,
Yeah.
let's say you eat something, you eat, I don't know, a sugary, whatever. You have a bagel for breakfast or you have a donut, which they love to give us at the hospital, right? Donuts for breakfast. If you eat that and then you crash afterwards, you have an insulin problem. That shouldn't be happening, right? So people who don't have insulin resistance or issues with their insulin cycle, spikes and peaks and valleys, they can usually eat something sugary and they'll be okay. But as soon as you start seeing that you're having that crash after you have something sugary, you should be suspicious that you have something going on metabolically. For our animals, it's a lot harder to tell. But I think I read a stat a while back that said for every 10 pounds a dog is overweight, it can shave a year off of their life. Does that sound right to you, or did I just completely make it
Yeah,
up?
that sounds about right. And then that depends on 10 pounds on a Chihuahua versus a Labrador. That's hard.
Yes.
But for Labradors, it's pretty clear. If they're in that overweight, which is a category, and that's a 5 or a 6 on a body condition scoring system scale of up to 9, that takes 4 years. So that or higher, that takes 4 years off of their lives. That's almost a third of their lifespan.
When you have an animal that's only living to be 12, which is what I'm the most terrified of because I have a golden retriever and he's halfway there. The idea of anything decreasing that already tragically short lifespan, which has decreased already by 25% since the 90s, is devastating.
Yeah, it's horrid. So here's an interesting question, and I think this is a common one out there. So Patty's saying her dog has a yeast infection and diabetes. So can she eat fresh or powdered mushrooms with yeast? And I thought it was a no, but I want to give them to her. And so I will let you answer that. But I'm going to say first off, Patty, yeast infections are secondary overgrowths to something else. So what that means is that you still haven't solved what's underneath that. And I think the diabetes is a clear indication that there's, again, the gut's not functioning correctly. And so nothing is going to stay in balance. So what are your thoughts on mushrooms with these guys?
Yeah. So when we think about yeast in the gut, remember that your microbiome should be this beautiful garden with all kinds of different organisms and many bacteria and many different yeast. The problem is you just want them to actually be in balance, right? You don't want something taking over and then causing an imbalance. And so when you're feeding mushrooms, fungi, like mushrooms as a category, is not the same as having yeast in the gut, like candida and things like that. So I would still feed mushrooms. And the mushrooms are not really going to, what's the word I'm looking for? Quite nourish those yeast. Like mushrooms are a great prebiotic for bacteria, but they don't work quite the same as with when you have yeast in the gut. And also, a lot of times you can outcompete, not that's what you're actually giving them for, but I wouldn't have a problem with that. What this person needs to do, Patty, is you need to get to that underlying cause there. And the diabetes is a big thing because when you have too much sugar, like cellular within the body itself, that feeds yeast. And so getting the diabetes under control is going to get the yeast under control as well.
Right on. And that's the thing, is that yeast is a different kingdom from fungi. So it's not going to be an issue. And that's exactly right. You really need to work on the nutritional aspect to get the diabetes under control. And that's where working with Cara or one of the other holistic pet health coaches is going to be absolutely critical, because from your question, you've been banging around trying to figure this out for yourself. this is where if you work with somebody, you can get a handle on this and get things back under control. So I think that's going to be super, super amazing. Now, you've got a calculator. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, this calculator, it took a really long time to get it right. So, one of the things that I started noticing is I've spent years now helping just on Facebook groups and social media and stuff and just answering questions. And I remember when I first started this fresh food journey, I was so paranoid about figuring out exactly how much of each ingredient I needed to feed my dogs. So I remember I started out, I think I was doing barf, and I literally calculated down to the 100th decimal how many ounces I needed to feed my dogs. It was completely ridiculous. I was just overbearing about it. But I started realizing that while there are multiple calculators out there to help people who want to feed raw, that include bones and meat and organs and blah, 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 there was nothing that existed for people that wanted to feed cooked if they wanted to DIY by like parsing it out. So you could make something like, you could use like a template like the original Crock-Pot diet, right? And that does a great job of saying this amount of this and this amount of this, put it all together, cook it, and then, give scoops or however much feed by the weight of your dog. The problem is, I think if people wanted to go up to their local co-op or something and get like hearts from here and organs from here, and then I went to my grocery store and I grabbed my veggies from here, but how much of that do I feed? Because I'm not feeding bone, and all the calculators out there tell me that I have to feed bones. So I decided to create a calculator that does have the raw option, so you can do that still, but it also includes a cooked version. And there's options within the cooked version. So you can do one of three things. You can do gently cooked, but still feed raw meaty bones. Now, I don't think most people are going to do that because you don't really have a reason for feeding gently cooked, but you can do that if you want. The second option is you can feed gently cooked and sub air dried bones. So I partnered up with Real Dog Box, who shared with me their moisture reduction math essentially for their raw meaty bones, for their air dried meaty bones. And so I have them in there. So you can use those kinds of substitutes if you like. Or the last one, bone substitute. So some kind of powder, a Better Bones or Buck Bones Organics, which is probably my favorite one. It's antler. And so what this section does is, in order to make up for both the caloric loss and the nutrient loss of removing the bone from the diet, what I do is I divide the presumed 10% bone that you would have fed back into the muscle meat and whatever your fiber or vegetable portion is. So that 10%, 5% goes back into the muscle meat or muscular organ, and the other 5% goes into your fiber section. And that was the best way that I found for making up for calories and also not losing those micronutrients that you find in the raw meaty bone that you would have fed, like the magnesium and the phosphorus and stuff like that. And then, of course, you're giving some kind of powder that is giving you your calcium that's missing. So that's what my calculator does. And I have noticed that for the people that have been using it tentatively, that's the option that they choose when they are going into the cooked section.
Interesting. And that's interesting that you chose to add a cooked food section. So why was that?
Some people just feed cooked. They either feel like they have to, or they just truly want to. And it's easier for them because they're cooking for themselves and they want to cook for their dogs. Perhaps you have a dog who maybe has a malignancy. And although I don't think that all dogs with cancer have to eat a cooked diet, if you are severely immunosuppressed, so let's say you're doing chemo and your white blood cell counts plummet very low, those are the kinds of animals who perhaps should be having a cooked diet for a little while. Or you have a senior, and sometimes as dogs get older, they just need a cooked diet, and that's fine. Those are great options for cooked. Animals with GI issues. Sometimes our animals who have some kind of underlying GI condition like EPI, exocrine pancreatic insufficiency. That's the word vomit.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah, those animals might need a cooked food with their pancreatic enzymes. So there's any number of reasons why you might need cooked. Maybe you just don't feel comfortable doing raw. Maybe you're just really afraid of any potential bacteria or whatever the reason, and you just really want to do cooked. Now there's an option for you. If you want to DIY, go to my calculator, plug it in, and it's going to give you your numbers.
Right on. It's a very different approach from the way I would set up a diet. But that's the thing is that
Mm.
that's why there's so many diets, right? There's no
Right.
one way. You have to figure out what works for your pet, for the pet sitting in front of you. And Sherry, I dropped a link to the calculator in the comments there. Go grab that and check it out. They're
Mm.
listed on the bottom, one of the pages in there. Okay. Has a kitty that is overweight. So strategy, hours, fasting, etc., etc. She's 4 years old. She got overweight after neutering, surprise, surprise, and she loves to eat. She's about a kilo overweight. So that's for us in the US, it's 2.2 pounds extra. And on a 10-pound cat, that's a lot. That's
It's a lot.
20% of her body weight, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a lot for a kitty. And after getting neutered too, I think the question here is, what is your cat eating? Because if your kitty's eating kibble, your kitty's eating carbs, and cats are obligate carnivores. They have to have a high meat diet. It is what's most species appropriate for them. They need it for their metabolism. They need it for their heart health. They need it for their gut health. They literally need it. So if you're feeding kibble, my answer would be first things first, get them on fresh food. And I will be the first to tell you, it took me almost a year to get my cats, who are seniors, off kibble and onto fresh food. So you need patience, you need perseverance, you need understanding, and you need to really, really have empathy for them, because you're taking an animal who is suspicious by nature and asking them to do something completely different after they got used to it and feel safe about it for years. So it's going to take some time. And I did write a blog article about this. So on my rawpotventures.com/blog, if you go to this, probably the second page now, there is a whole article all about transitioning kitties to fresh food.
It is a pain. So with one of my own cats, Romy, similar situation, 6 months to go from kibble to canned food, and then 3 months to canned to cooked. And at 23, she's like, I am not eating this anymore. Where's the damn Friskies? And I'm like, all right, you're 23. You get the
Yep, you're
Friskies.
23.
Whatever you
You
want,
get whatever
baby.
you want. Yep.
Yeah,
Whatever
exactly.
you want.
So patience is really, really critical.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, Kay, is that if you invest that time right now, the payoff in the future is going to be immeasurable. So right
Oh,
on.
down below, she said that her kitty eats natural food / cooked meat mainly.
Meat mainly. Okay.
Yeah. So
So here's one thing I'm going to interject. I have seen a lot of raw fed animals that are obese. And so even though you may be feeding the appropriate thing, if it's too much, that's not good. And if
yeah,
she is ravenous all the time, then there's something going on. Either
yeah,
she's not assimilating the nutrients well, or the
thyroid.
gut is so whacked. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
might want to check thyroid, because I mean it's very rare for cats to get hypothyroidism,
Hmm.
but it's not
But
unheard of. If
possible.
she's gaining weight, maybe thyroid. But yeah, I would say figure out how much you're feeding, because like 150 calories is kind of average for like an indoor middle-aged cat, right? That's not that much. My cats actually eat just a tad less than that because they're seniors. So maybe try and figure out how many calories you're feeding a day. That could help too.
Yeah. Yeah, right on. And I had a kitty, Pep, who traveled with us for many years. Come here. I know you got to come help. You got to show up every time. Um,
Oh,
it's
hello.
yeah. She says she's chilly today.
Oh,
But if Pep was hungry, he would eat our salads if we didn't watch, and so he would go. Yeah. So if your kitty is really hungry, then that's another option too, is to offer some veggies, because they can get some of that going on. I like
yeah,
chicken gizzards too for kind of
yes,
cat distractors.
yeah.
So because a lot of so and think about the other thing to think about too for cats, they are stress creatures like us.
Mm-hmm.
And so they stress eat. And so if
Yeah.
your anxiety is high, maybe her anxiety is high for reasons that don't make sense to you right off the rip, start looking at that. If we can bring down the stress level, then a lot of that stress eating goes away too.
Mm-hmm. And boredom too. Cats eat out of boredom, and maybe if you can get something like like an air dried bone or something like that. I think it might be farmhounds. I found a really nice. They have a chicken gizzards, but it's like in a stick and it's air dried and it's really really great. It almost looks like it's a dried pheasant neck, but it's not. It's gizzards, and kitties usually love like gizzards and hearts and stuff like that. And that was like, it's a nice distractor. It makes them chew, first of all, so it's great for their teeth. It takes them a little bit longer to consume. It's giving them mental stimulation and enrichment. So maybe even something like that, make them work a little bit harder for their food. It's taking up the time and still helping them feel full.
Right on. Yeah, and I've been seeing these really cool cat toys that make a thing go around in a circle. So
Mm,
entertainment and, giving them something to do, and then that creates exercise, which helps to
mhm,
relieve the stress and the boredom. And
mhm.
so you've got all sorts of stuff going on there.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's see, where are we? So this is an interesting dietary remedy with feline herpes virus, I think is what you're meaning, Kimberly.
Mm.
7-month-old kitty who eats raw. Um, so
I don't know
I
about any dietary I mean, I would say like support the immune system, immune health, maybe like a myco dog tincture because medicinal mushrooms are helpful. I don't think we're allowed to say that anymore. Functional mushrooms are helpful for that. We don't want the FDA butting in, or even like a full spectrum hemp extract, which is an immune modulator. I know that the two crazy cat ladies have
They've got
a
some
Vira
solutions. Yeah.
X. Yeah,
Viralize, I think. Yeah.
yeah.
Virax, that's it. So that's been helpful. Lysine is a good old
Hmm.
standby. Again, working on supporting gut health because again, the immune system is there, and if that's out of whack, that's not going to work well. So it's a multimodal approach, and again,
Yeah.
controlling stress. Just because, like us, any
Hmm.
type of yeah, any
Yeah.
type of stress kind of can create issues. So right on. So Kimberly, you're already doing lysine. So
Awesome.
look at stress, and then the other thing is that if you're doing all the things and you're still having issues, part of it is this kitty is 7 months old, and so she's growing, which is a stress in and of itself. And
Yeah.
so you may see some recrudescences in spite
Mhm.
of everything you're doing. But I would definitely work on the gut because that's underlying everything. So
And
check
I
that.
would
Check
check
that.
out the two crazy cat ladies. They have great stuff. They have blogs, they have their podcasts, they talk about everything feline. And I know they have that Vira, I think it's called Vira X. And
Yeah,
they have some really great products. So I would check them out.
that sounds exactly right. Yeah. So cool. Yeah. So if you don't know Two Crazy Cat Ladies, go check them out. They are
Mhm.
really amazing. Um, we'll share their link here,
Yes, I
and
love them
they've
so
got
much.
a really cool symptom checker and all sorts of good stuff. Cool.
Yeah.
So last question for you: if somebody was just starting down the path towards holistic health for their pets, what, and I think you've probably already answered this, but just for
Yeah.
kicks, what are the most important things you could start with that are easy, simple,
Yeah.
going to help make the changes very simple and effective?
So first things first, please just breathe. And I really mean it when I say that because when I first got here, I stepped into this magical land of the holistic pet space. I was so overwhelmed. I thought my brain was going to explode. And that overwhelm actually gave me paralysis. I waited months after researching and researching before I did anything because I was so scared that I was going to mess up by taking a step that I was paralyzed and I did nothing. So take a breath. Please believe in yourself because you are your pet's best advocate. You know what's best for them. You have that intuition. It is a gut feeling. So take a breath, believe in yourself, feel empowered. And then maybe follow somebody like myself or Dr. Ruth. And you can work with a coach if you feel like that's what you need to really kind of wade or dip your toe in there. Um, and just try, you know. And if I had to pick one thing, it was just one thing at a time. The first thing I would focus on is nutrition. So you're coming in and you're like, Man, Kara, you just told me way too many things. This model is huge. I can't change 6 pillars. What are you talking about? You're a psychopath. Start with food. Always start with food.
Right on. Yeah. Gee, that sounds familiar somehow. But that's exactly it. Just you can go, like, if you go down the wormhole and research and research and research, there's too many differing opinions. So take a deep breath, and out of all the research you've done, who do you feel like is actually going to take you down the path that seems right for you and your pets? And then
Yeah.
follow them. And honestly, if you've got a pet with health problems, work with somebody that can help you work through the problems. So we've got Kara's website here. You can go to my website, check out the other coaches, but I think it is just critical that you put your trust in somebody and get get a plan together that's going to help you move forward and really move the needle. Because what breaks my heart is questions from y'all, and you've tried the 27 supplements and you're a year down the road and your pet is no better. So
Yeah.
take a deep breath and then plan to work with somebody that will help you really move the needle.
Yeah.
So,
For sure.
Cara, thank you so much for spending time with us today. This has been amazing. Great bunch of folks on today. You guys have had some super questions, and join us next week. We'll have a new, cool, fun adventure. Cheers.
Bye, everyone.